I miss Disney villains. Good versus evil can be such a broad concept, but having a villain embody that evil or jealousy or hubris helps us put a face to the concept. Villains often represent the other side of the hero's coin and create challenges that ultimately bring out the best in the hero. Villains are fun, exciting, and often cautionary tales. And because we haven't had a true Disney villain in a long time, I started watching the animation catalog on Disney Plus, which then led me to watching all of their live action remakes and counterparts. And I eventually came across Maleficent, which I hadn't seen before and is a truly fascinating movie because of how it takes a character previously seen as a pure villain and turns her into an anti hero. Now, an anti-hero is a main character who lacks a lot of the moral qualities you would associate with a traditional hero. A good example is Jay Gatsby, who, for all intents and purposes, is selfish, corrupt, has bad morals.
Can't you see who this guy is?
The only respectable thing about you, old sport, is your money. Your money, that's it.
Now, Maleficent doesn't go that far, but it's interesting to see how many changes were made, and there were a lot of changes compared to the original character that I want to talk about. But first, let's talk about Sleeping Beauty. Following the huge success of Cinderella, the writing for Sleeping Beauty began in 1951. After a lot of rewrites and changing sequences, Disney's response to the initial progression of the story wasn't very strong. The issue primarily had to do with the second act and this treasure hunt sequence that was really prevalent. So they go back and instead try to strengthen the romance of the first act, but it still isn't working. So they drop the thread entirely and have Prince Philip and Aurora meet in the forest by chance.
Once upon a dream.
I had a young woman do some live action reference for me. Her name was Helene Stanley. She did the dances and this sort of thing, which you could do on your own, but that's doing it the hard way. Why not have something you could refer to?
See, long before initial animation began on the project, the original storyline focused heavily on the romance between Prince Philip and Aurora, but was ultimately condensed to one scene. Obviously, this is a huge change in Maleficent. The two still meet in the forest, but there's no song and dance, just a conversation.
On my way to King Stephen's castle, I've become hopelessly lost. Can you help me?
There's actually a really important reason for that, and we're going to get to that in a bit. Now, this isn't a video about the production history of Sleeping Beauty, but it is important to put that film in context because I think a lot of it has to do with the major changes they made in Maleficent, and wow, there are a lot of changes. The initial date of inception to make a feature film about Maleficent is unclear, but we can assume it was around 2009 to 2010, which is when Angelina Jolie was attached to play Maleficent and Linda Wolverton was commissioned to write the script. So now they have to take this character, arguably the most interesting character from Sleeping Beauty, and make her an anti-hero instead of a villain. And how do you do that? Give her a sympathetic backstory. Okay, so in Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent is really nothing more than an evil fairy who is upset that she wasn't invited to the christening of Aurora, so she puts a curse on her that would eventually kill her. She's more of an archetype of a villain. Her past is unclear, we just know she's evil, and the film relies heavily on her visual image and performance to convey how bad she is.
This movie, probably more so than any other Disney movie for all of its stylization, tried to simulate real human subtlety in the acting performances.
Well, this is a pleasant surprise.
In Maleficent, a lot changes. She still retains her villainous look, but the film first introduces Maleficent as a kid. The backstory is she falls in love with a young boy named Stephen, whose greed ruins their relationship. Eventually, the king orders for someone to kill Maleficent, but when Stefan tries, he can't bring himself to do it, so he cuts off her wings instead. Years later, Stefan is now the king, and Maleficent hears about a christening for his daughter, so she shows up and curses her. And this is pretty wholly the difference between both characterizations. Sleeping Beauty's Maleficent puts a curse on Aurora because she was upset that she wasn't invited to the christening. Maleficent's Maleficent puts a curse on Aurora to get revenge on the person who betrayed her and cut her wings. Not only does this reframe the relationship she has with Stefan, it completely changes the relationship between her and Aurora. See, in Sleeping Beauty, King Stefan sends Aurora to live with 3 fairy godmothers who more or less raise her happily until her 16th birthday. In Maleficent, not only is Maleficent always present, she's integral to Aurora's survival. From a storytelling perspective, and since the titular character is now the protagonist, this is setting up the eventual arc and twist on the True Love's Kiss device. Kind of like Frozen. This movie actually has a lot in common with Frozen. Let's talk about Prince Philip. Prince Philip was always an interesting character because the entire film depended on the audience believing that he had fallen in love with Princess Aurora after only 3 minutes. In fairness, he isn't given a whole lot of time with Aurora in Maleficent, but that doesn't matter anymore because he's just a misdirect. Kind of like Kristoff in Frozen. Whereas True Love's kiss in Sleeping Beauty came from Prince Philip, Maleficent's comes from Maleficent. So obviously, this is a big change, and it required a much stronger bond between Maleficent and Aurora. It also inherently gives Maleficent a hero's journey where she tries to reverse the curse she put on her. In Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent's curse was meant to kill Aurora. Unfortunately, the three fairies are able to alter the curse, so it puts her in a deep sleep, which can only be broken by True Love's kiss. In Maleficent, Maleficent is the one who adds the stipulation about True Love's kiss, specifically because she doesn't believe such thing exists.
True love's kiss, remember? It can break the spell.
True love's kiss? Have you not worked it out yet? I cursed her that way because there is no such thing.
So now we have an anti-hero with a clear arc. Because of her wound, she doesn't believe that true love actually exists. But over time, and through her unlikely bond with Aurora, she comes to one that it does, just not in the way she thought. Kind of like Frozen. In Frozen, Elsa's curse, though unintentional, freezes all of Arendelle, and only an act of true love can fix everything. Kristoff, like Prince Philip, is a misdirect to make you think their kiss will save the day when in reality, it's Elsa and Anna's connection. The difference with Maleficent, however, and its treatment of the misdirect character is pretty drastic. Prince Philip really doesn't have anything to do in the third act. This is because of the other change, the dragon. In Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent turns into a monstrous dragon that Prince Philip has to slay and ultimately kill. In Maleficent, she herself isn't the actual dragon. Instead, the dragon was actually meant for King Stefan, who, in this movie, is the true villain. This, at its core, is what changes the movie. And it's the reason that Maleficent, who was previously considered just a villain, is able to now become an anti-hero. And this is why I made this video. I think Maleficent actually improves a lot upon Sleeping Beauty, primarily because it takes the character who originally had the most agency and makes her the protagonist. Now, while I don't think Disney is going to do this with a lot of the other villains, I do think this could lead to a resurgence in the villain in general in Disney animated movies. I miss their villains.